Afternoon, everybody. We have a new job there we are working on. We are working on a 2013 Kia Optima EX that came in as a no run, no start. First thing we did is we take and check the voltage on the battery, and the battery was about 12 volts and some change. That should be enough to take and spin the vehicle over, and it does not. This one right here is kind of a weird vehicle where you have a push button start, but you also need a physical key to stick it in the ignition switch and take and release the steering wheel. So tried a couple of times. Take and start it up, and all we get is like a grunt out of the starter. The engine does turn. This is actually, if you've been watching my other videos, you may recognize this vehicle. This is the one that we put an engine in about 2 years ago. Maintenance has been kept up on it. The family that has this car, they were going to one of the quick oil change places, and weren't really satisfied with the performance of their service, and it cost them an engine because they didn't put any oil in it, and that's the reason we had to take and put an engine in it. So this time here, it's only a couple of little things it could be. The battery is not charging. So to take and disprove that theory, what we did is we put a jumper box on the battery, and then we tried to start it, and we just got a grunt out of the starter. So we decided this is a starter, and this has drawn too much current. Can't perform its job anymore. The starter was not changed when the engine was put in. It was operating properly at that point. But unfortunately, this car was manufactured by a company that, in my opinion, hates mechanics. They want everything done in their workshop at an exorbitant amount of hourly charge. The starter is down here underneath the intake manifold. Okay. There are a couple of panels that are on the bottom of the car. So I went ahead and went under the car, and there's two of these big plastic panels that they encompass the whole underside of the car and make access impossible. I mean, you can barely do an oil change, with them in there. But the reason I needed to take it out is because there is a bracket that looks just like this, that this side here goes to the engine, this side here goes to the underside of the intake manifold, and which is right up there. Okay, so you need to take those loose, so therefore you got to drop the panels. And also, to my joy, one of the starter bolts is accessible from here. And the starter lives right behind there. Okay, so this is the oil cooler mechanism, and the right here are the oil cooler hoses. And there's just all kinds of stuff that you can't get to that the top starter bolt. Also, the intake manifold is curved down, which is this area right here, and it won't allow you to take and remove the starter, so you must take and remove the intake manifold. So last time when I had to take and do the knock sensor, which lives under here as well, as a matter of fact, there's a connector right here And one of these connectors here, and I forget which one it is the knock sensor. Okay, so first thing we're going to do is we're going to take and remove the bolts for the wiring loom that is on the intake manifold, and we're also going to take this bracket loose that is on here to take in and kind of free things up just a little bit. Okay, and then the next thing we're going to be doing is there are very few intake manifold bolts, and there's a couple here. If you go through this hole here, and I think you pull your dipstick out, and I think there's one here, and there's one on the end, one over here, one over here. There's only about 7 or 8 bolts holding the thing in, and then this whole assembly will come loose. Okay, so let's go ahead and start loosening things up. Okay, so the wiring's been moved out of the way. Basically what we did is this cam position sensors here, and the solenoids for the cam advance are here and back here. We have to take and release the plug on those so we can just lay the wiring back over here. We've disconnected the knock sensor and the other sensors go there, so we can have enough room to take and get to the bolts. And we're going to have to take the intake off because there's a clamp right down here that we need to take and get to, and we can't get to that the way it is. So what I've done in taking the intake manifold off, I have the bolts out of here. There we go. Right here and right here. There's one on each side. Okay. And then there is one right down through here. Okay. Don't drop those down because it might go inside the engine. This one right here is a regular bolt. So you can go ahead and leave that one. I found that there's a liquid cooling system that goes through the intake manifold and also partially through the throttle body. So that means that there's a bunch of hoses and wires and stuff on the throttle body. So what I do is a lot of times, instead of taking all the bolts or taking all the hoses and wires and all that stuff off the throttle body, I'll just go ahead and take the 4 bolts out of the throttle body and then go ahead and put that to the side, and it's a lot easier. The one hose that is a real bugger is this one right here. This clip here is on the bottom, so I can't get to it. And then over here, this one is on the bottom as well. So I think when I take and go ahead and install this, I'm going to take this clip and turn it around, make it a little bit easier for the next guy. And so the intake manifold, I believe, is pretty much ready to take and come off now. We have the 2 cooling lines off of it. We just disconnected them at a convenient point. See, that is the one thing. When you're working on these cars that are not friendly to mechanics, you do stuff for your own convenience. You know, wherever you find a good destination point, you know, go ahead and jump on that, you know, regardless of what the manual says. So let's take and remove the intake manifold. Okay, when you're pulling the starter motor out, here I got the starter motor out, okay, and I left the bolt in there. I got to that bolt. I had to go way over here. I used a 3-inch extension, a universal joint, and a deep 14mm socket to get on there. And you must hit that bolt straight on because it is really tight on there. If you want to take and go ahead and use Mr. Cheater Pipe, you have to take and be square on that bolt, or you will take and round it off. If you round it off, you are hosed. Okay, so just be careful with that one. So let's go ahead and start the reassembly process, and let's get our new starter ready to go back in. So when we get a new part, of course we want to take and compare it with the old part, and especially we want to make sure this area here is the same and it's clocked in the same position. The bolts are in the same position. Okay, you want to take a look at the gear. Okay, so this gear's a little bit chewed up. This one. Okay, when you're pulling the starter motor out, here I got the starter motor out, okay, and I left the bolt in there. I got to that bolt, I had to go way over here. I used a 3-inch extension, a universal joint, and a deep 14mm socket to get on there. And you must hit that bolt straight on because it is really tight on there. If you want to take and go ahead and use Mr. Cheater Pipe, you have to take and be square on that bolt, or you will take and round it off. If you round it off, you are hosed. Okay, so just be careful with that one. So let's go ahead and start the reassembly process, and let's get our new starter ready to go back in. So when we get a new part, of course we want to take and compare it with the old part, and especially we want to make sure this area here is the same and it's clocked in the same position. The bolts are in the same position. Okay, you want to take a look at the gear. Okay, so this gear's a little bit chewed up. This one's brand new. Okay, so let's go ahead and throw that puppy back in there. This goes back in there just like that. And there it is. It's back in position, so you can start screwing it back in. And I would advise you take and put the 2 bolts in that take and hold the starter to the transmission bell housing before you take and do anything else. Okay. So here we have the new starter in here. Okay. And just for your edification, not that it has to be changed on this vehicle right here, but if you look right there, let's see if I can get a little light on it. Right here. Okay. You see that bolt there with the yellow stripe on it? That is holding the knock sensor in. Okay, so that's where the knock sensor is located. And this is everything that you got to do, exactly the same thing, to take and change the knock sensor if it's acting up. Okay, if you don't have a rattle in your engine and you get a knock sensor code, that's what you're going to have to change. Okay, all right, so next thing to go back on, we're going to check all the seals and make sure everything's okay. We're going to wipe everything down, then we're going to reinstall the intake manifold. So since we have the new starter in, and you very gingerly take and put these connectors back on here, make sure everything's tight. We kind of make sure that we have everything out of the way. We've replaced the gasket for the throttle body and the gaskets that they can go into the their interface between the intake manifold and the head, and we wiped all the surfaces off. We wiped all these surfaces off. We're ready to go back in with the intake manifold. One thing that I would suggest is this bracket right here. Okay, this one connector that is on here is for the knock sensor. Okay, you can go ahead and leave that on there, but you'll notice that there is a small hole here, right here, and right here, and those have the connectors on them. To take and get to these 2 10mm screws, I would go ahead and pop those things off. You can take a sharp tool from the back and just stick it in there, and then take and pull those things off, and it'll make assembly a whole lot easier. And then those just pop back on, they slide on, and then you'll hear a noticeable click. Okay, so let's go ahead and let's get that the intake manifold back on. Okay, so to get the intake manifold in, you have to come at an angle like this, and then down, and then in, because you're trying to take and clear the dipstick, which is right here. And you also have to make sure that the throttle body is out of the way, and it'll go ahead and pop right in. So we're going to go ahead and we're going to batten this thing down. One bolt right here, nut here, and nut here. There's a bolt under here, and there's also one bolt here. And then the intake manifold will be installed. Then the only thing we need to take and do is start putting the wiring back in, and those are a bunch of 10mm bolts. I would go ahead and put the throttle body back on and all the connectors and the hoses first. Okay, make your job a little bit easier. Just wanted to show you something that is a common mistake that when you're putting stuff back together. Okay, so right here we put the throttle body on first, and I wanted to create this mistake to take and show you what I'm talking about. Okay, this right here is one of the sensors for the intake manifold. It might be a map sensor or something on that. I'd have to take and look it up. Okay, but the actual plug is down here. Okay, so there is not enough line to take in and make this reach. Okay, so what you can do is, instead of taking the intake the throttle body off again, there's one plug that is right here. Okay, and if you go ahead and you pop that out, okay, and you can take that and wind it around the cooling hose, which is right here, and wind that puppy around there. There we go. And kind of a tight fit, and it comes. Okay, so now you got plenty of line. Okay, so this is supposed to take and actually come around the front of the throttle body. So there's a bracket here with a 10mm bolt. Okay, so now we got plenty of line for the sensor that goes into the intake manifold, and also the one that goes on to the throttle body. Okay, common mistake and easy to fix. So when you get everything all back together, make sure you check all your connections. Right down here, it's common to leave this little vacuum line off right here. Okay, so gotta make sure that's on there. Or your wiring and everything is back on there. This wiring is back on here. The induction system's back on there. Start it up and run it, and we did. Everything's fine. So hopefully I've given you some good information. Make sure you do a little maintenance on it before you send it out of your work area. Make sure the oil is up and all your fluids are up. Check your tire pressure, and send them on their way. Okay, hope I've given you some good information, and come back next time to take and see what we're doing next. I hope you have a wonderful day.